WNST here to discuss all things, let's see, hockey, basketball, lacrosse. I'm sure he'll get some MMA in, but I don't talk about that. He does not watch the Orioles lately, but he has been seen with a veteran celebrity baseball fan at a hockey game last week. It's not often that Dennis and Koulatsos and I get together at a hockey game, but when we do, you have to mix in Marlin Man, right? I mean, that was something. You, me, and Marlin Man washed in red down there at center ice at the Caps game last week, huh?
Yeah, that was quite the trifecta. The three of us, three guys there meeting at that part of the world at that particular point in time, and there was a fun time, great spending some time with you for sure.
All right, well, let's get on to the topic of the week for me, and I've been taking this one on with everyone because there'll be plenty of time to talk about hockey and basketball and bad baseball and Manny Machado and Lamar and Joe. But the gambling thing that went down last week, I find to be one of the more fascinating, thick, so much meat on the bone because of how it's going to affect sport, how it's going to affect the profit center and the revenue center for all of these leagues and all of these teams. And then it comes down to much like, marijuana in Denver and in Colorado and Washington, how it's going to affect states' rights and which states are going to participate in this and which ones aren't. And Dennis, I mean, I'm trying to get a Belmont bus together, right, for June the 9th. By the time I get there, it'll be Old Hat in New Jersey. We can stop in Monmouth and bet the Yankees game next Monday. Vegas is coming to your hometown, right? And we got to figure that out in our state versus West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and all that's going on. But this is as big a sports story as it affects regular people as anything we've seen in recent times.
No, I think you're 100% correct, Nestor. It's going to change the landscape of sports as we know it. A lot of things out there that are going to be up in the air, uncharted waters, such as the NFL teams now, running up the clock versus, taking the field goal, leaving those field goal late in the game, hockey games, the empty net goal, et cetera. Having full-time officials in the NFL, I mean, it's going to be very, very controversial now that this thing has come to the forefront, I might tell you.
Well, I mean, how are they going to regulate it? I mean, I keep saying they couldn't regulate their own sport in the NFL in a 2-year investigation to figure out whether Tom Brady was cheating. He clearly was. I agree. And they, the cheaters have won in these sports for a long, long time. And, I mean, we are not far out from a referee who was making nothing, quite frankly, out there officiating games between Michael Jordan and Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, where they're all making tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. There's always going to be somebody at the bottom of the food chain that, $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 to throw this or, look the other way on that. There's always going to be somebody willing to do that. I mean, there were kids for $5 an hour willing to go in there and take air out of footballs for Tom Brady, literally, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it, Nestor. And look, that's why I don't gamble. Part of the reason why I don't gamble, I don't trust the people making the calls and the officials that we've seen through the years. No matter what the sport has been, they definitely have a deciding factor in the outcome. Even in baseball, that I don't watch a lot, the strike zone, right? I've seen different umpires squeeze or expand the strike zone. That also has an outcome on the game. Ed Frankovic always talks about the officials, about what to look for. He does great analysis for WNST.
Well, look at the Orlov call, right, in Game 5 on Saturday night. I mean, that changed it went from a 2-0 game instead of a 1-0 game in the Caps on the power play. That changes the complete complexion of the series in every way. And we can go back through so many instances in so many ways, whether it's pass interference, those kinds of calls that change games and change outcomes. And I know it goes nuts in Vegas all the time, right? Like when those calls happen, you hear Al Michaels at the end of a game. But I don't know how the league's going to get involved in that and put an NFL.com app on my phone where I can go onto my phone from my seat in 513 in 2022 and bet on or against Lamar Jackson to hand the ball off or throw it. From the baseball perspective, Dennis, and this is what I've talked about all week, we're all wondering what could save baseball. Well, maybe gambling could. I mean, baseball would be the one sport that happens 7 months of the year, every night. There's plenty of action in the way there used to be for horse racing, where football's never going to be that kind of action. Football's going to be a lot of action, but 16 weekends a year, once a week, twice a week, whatever it is. it's not the same as being able to bet around the clock, like an open casino.
Well, look at also the effect that fantasy sports has had on the entire sports league, right? Fantasy football, fantasy baseball, basketball, whatever it is. Money's been attached to that as well, and it's changed the landscape of the game. People just love to gamble. They're going to bet on no matter what it is. And the only reason I use fantasy sports is it keeps me up to date with injuries, right? That's the only reason for me as a sports fanatic, help me keep on top of it. But when you're attaching big money to these things, look, you got to follow the money, right? And that's exactly what's happening right now. The money's getting so huge that everybody wants a piece of it.
Well, I mean, remember when Shanahan used to fudge his injury reports all the time, and obviously the paranoid Belichick Harbaugh types, getting an injury report that has integrity is already hard enough. Doing that when the league is getting a cut of the action, and when you consider insider trading and all that goes on with regulatory committees in New York with the stock exchange and banking, that there's all sorts of hokey pokey going on. I mean, we got a president we don't know what he's into with the Russian government. We got a league that doesn't know how much air's in their football. We got a league that can't adjudicate pass interference or even knowing what a catch is or what a catch isn't. And now the league's going to get involved where one call is going to have $500 million bet on it in an AFC championship game through their portal and their website. That's a hell of a lot of pressure on an official who's making $5,000 on a Sunday afternoon, right?
Yeah, it really, really is. And even when the NFL chose to put a team in Vegas, just like we have a hockey team in Vegas. Look, to me, just because it's there already, just because the team is stationed there, I don't think that those players or those people affiliated with the team are more prone to gamble because they're there based on a 3-mile strip. It is what it is. They have the ability to do that anywhere now. Again, it's going to be above board, so to speak. And look, it's going to definitely change the landscape of sports. It's going to make it more controversial, which will probably fuel the product even more and get people to empty out their pockets, give more ways to look at sports and more ways to spend their money.
Well, this whole thing started with rotisserie baseball in my era, right? And maybe for you, you're an Essex guy. I'm a Dundalk guy. My dad would come back, every Wednesday or Thursday from the Point. There would be a block pool, right? You could have the Jets and the Bills or the Jets and the Colts or whatever, the Colts and the Jets or the Colts and the Bills. And, you'd get the 7 and the 7 or the 0 and the 0, and you'd fill in your block. And then you'd have the little pool cards you rip in half, not as an inducement to wager, never, of course. But, you could take Rice and 37 points against Texas on the Saturday card, and you could circle your 5 for 18 mythical points or 25 mythical points or whatever that VIG was. And, that was gambling to me in the 1970s and the 80s. We're in a whole different place now where if you're a gambling addict, and I've known them, I've employed them, I've had them call into my show, man, the offshore thing and that sort of action and Louis the bookmaker and Dennis, maybe it's my naive nature of loving sports for the actual integrity of it and the hometown part and the fact that it says Orioles on it or Baltimore on it or whatever. I've never known a bookie. I've never been offered cocaine on the street either, right? But I've never had a guy come up to me and say, hey, you want $100 of action on this nasty? Why don't you bet on it? I know a bookie. Right. I've been on the radio 30 years, and that's never come to me. But I know it's out there, and now the leagues are going to try to be the bookie. And that is, I don't know. I've never wrapped my arms around how that might actually work in real terms.
Well, look at Michael Jordan, Nestor. The guy's on the top of his game. He's won 3 straight NBA championships, and he takes a 2-year hiatus to play baseball, right? Then his father gets shot and killed on the side of the road. Michael Jordan was a notorious, and still as a notorious gambler. Now he also owns a sports franchise. Michael Jordan had such an addiction. He used to bet on every shot of basketball games he used to watch with his friends. So when you have athletes themselves involved, deeply and addicted to gambling, that also impacts the outcomes of these sports and games in a very different way than we're accustomed to.
Well, I'll give you 2 words. Pete Rose.
Right. Well, there you go. There's another one. We've preceded Michael Jordan, of course, but that's always been out there. We've had referees in the NBA taken down for fixing games, and look, and boxing, the fix has been done for here because you only have to buy one person, so the price is right for all the bookies.
Well, and I saw Pulp Fiction, too. Dennis Koulatsos joining us here from Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, the SSV on WNST you'll hear on Thursday getting you ready for the weekend. Let's get on to the Ravens here, Den. The Lamar Joe thing, Smart money is on this being very normalized once Flacco comes in. I don't see this as rabble-rousing, but it has been sort of a bizarre month, right, with the Flacco-Lamar thing, and that it hasn't been, at least on the face of it, I don't want to say more cordial, but this hasn't been Joe's finest hour to sort of, tamp down the fire a little bit, which he's had the ability to do and clearly has had no interest in doing, right? No interest in just saying whatever the right thing is. Hey, I'm going to welcome him in. He's going to be a teammate. I'm going to bust my ass to get a job. He's going to bust his ass to get a job. We'll see how it goes. I don't know why he hasn't said that yet. I'm assuming that the week won't end without him saying that.
Mm-hmm. Look, I don't know. All I know is that they have to win. They're all trying to win, from Joe Flacco to John Harbaugh, Martin Morningwig, everybody, Wink Martindale. Look, this stuff is just things that the media creates. To me, it's really a non-story. They're going to go in. They're going to compete. They'll be teammates. Look, we wish the entire team all the best. I think they're doing some great things as an organization to get the fans back, whether it's the renovations, the escalators for guys our age to get up to the upper level, the video boards for the younger generation, the price reduction for the food, and hopefully a better product on the field now that we have the stench of last year out of the way. I think the Ravens are making all the right moves, but yeah, circling back to Flacco and Jackson, look, to me, competition is good. I think it's good for Joe Flacco to have somebody coming up behind him. I think it's good for the organization to insulate themselves against injury from Joe Flacco and give him a better option than RG3 if something should happen to Joe at some point during the season. So, to me, I'm very, very excited about the Ravens. A lot more excited than I was at this point last year.
Just when the Orioles can't get any worse, they wind up getting a trip to Chicago, and this is the week where you really get the determining factor, right? Like, if you suck worse than them, you might get the number one pick in the draft next year, and Brady Anderson can go out and pick whoever he wants. But you also see the other dreg team here in the Chicago White Sox so that we can measure how bad is at this point. And maybe they'll beat the White Sox a couple times here to feel good about themselves by the end of the week.
Well, the amazing part of me, for me, Nestor, is that nobody's gotten fired, right? Nobody. Who's accountable? Who's responsible, right? They had terrible results, terrible start. How much longer does Dan Duquette, what else does he need to see before he starts making changes, if he's able to make those changes, right? The product is really bad at this point.
Well, I had Nick Cafardo on last week, and he's pretty close with Dan Duquette, and I found that to be a fascinating conversation about the lack of resources, right? Mm-hmm. You run a company that if you're trying to sell cars on the internet and you have no one trying to sell a car on the internet, are you really trying to sell cars on the internet, right? And if you're trying to get into analytics and find the best baseball players and you have no scouts and you have no analytics people and you have no money to spend on the international pool, are you really doing what other teams are, the other 29 teams in Major League Baseball are doing it one way and you're not? From the inside out, this is where we are going to learn about all the warts once the Duquettes start singing to their friends when they leave, right?
Yep. Well, we'll see how the top of the dominoes as this thing continues to get off stay off the rails, not even get off the rails. They're already off the rails. It's tough to talk about next year already at this point of the season.
Should I come over to Coons Ford and buy a car now, or should I just wait like 3 weeks until the car will pick me up and drive me around on its own?
I think right now is a good time to buy because we're in the middle of our Memorial Day sale, and you get 0% for 72 months plus cash back, which is a phenomenal deal with the rising rates in particular. So right now is a great time to buy a car. Do they drive me around yet? Or, how far off are we? You attend these meetings. Seriously, what year will I come over to buy a car that I will have no intention of driving that will just drive me? 2021. That's what my people are telling me from Ford. No steering wheel, no brake pedal, and no accelerator. So 2021 is Ford Motor Company's target for mass producing these type of vehicles. What are they going to be called? They're going to be called cars. Self-driving? There's going to be a name for it, though, right? Autonomous. How about that? Autonomous. It's going to be like a limo picking you up, right? You just autonomous. You'll be able to go to Vegas, and come back to D.C. to watch the games between the Golden Knights and the Capitals, hopefully for another championship down the road. I would say this time, and this is the greatest example. I've driven to D.C. every other night now for a month, right, through all these games.
And I think about the opportunity cost of that hour and 10 minutes down and that 45 minutes back. And I'm thinking to myself, if you could give me back, I mean, what, I've been to 8 or 9 games here in the last, that's, 40 hours of my life, right? Like that I could probably get back that if the car drove me. So I'm looking forward to when you do sell me this car that I will have more productivity.
Well, there's a lot of stuff you can do. I will say this, Nestor. I took an Uber for the first time about 2 weeks ago, and I thought it was too expensive. I didn't like the cost factor. The convenience was great, but I thought it was too much money for the distance that my wife and I went. We went and saw a show at the Hippodrome 2 weeks ago. We parked at our favorite restaurant. We called it Uber. And again, it was very convenient, but it was $30 round trip, which I thought was too expensive for me. And I'm an Essex guy, like you said. At heart, I'm just this poor kid from Essex still.
Well, it's door to door, man. It's I remember the old days of having to call the cab company and wait around for the cab that never came. Remember that one?
Yep, I do. But I just thought that the value wasn't there for me. The convenience was there, but I didn't think it was valuable enough for me to do it again.
Do you ever hail a cab in the rain in New York? I've done that.
In New York, yes, I have.
Everyone should do that in a driving rainstorm, hail a cab in New York. Everyone, you can't really do it anymore because there's not as many cabs, but in the day, that was a true life experience about dog eat dog. You want to talk dog eat dog, hail a cab in New York in a rainstorm. How about that?
If you raise your hand in New York at any block, you're going to have a half a dozen cabs trying to get to you. It's quite amazing, and I'm also curious to see how, again, all this technology affects those drivers up there, right? Because they pay a lot of money for those medallions to use on their cab companies, et cetera. But now with the advent of Uber and then self-driving cars, it's going to change the landscape for sure.
All right, you'll be selling us the first self-driving car. Here's Dennis Koulatsos. He'll be driving us home on Thursday from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. Dennis, have a great week. Buckle up, man. We got Memorial Day coming up.
You got it, man. Can't wait. Thanks a lot for the time.
I am getting in bikini shape as well. Planet Fitness sponsors our morning newspaper at 7 a.m. $10 a month, and you, too, can get in the best shape of your life at planetfitness.com as summer is around the corner. You can find me, Nasty, at WNST.net, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. We're also trying to push a Belmont bus up to New York on June 9. If you have some interest in going to see Justify try to win the Triple Crown, toss me a note, nasty at WNST.net. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.